Well, what's going on at Spurs? What's going on?
Oh dear. A lot of things are going on, and I'm pretty certain we're not being told most of what's going on. There's very clearly some level of disconnect between certain players in the squad. Also, in my view, between Levy and Pochettino. So the business in the summer was dealt with. I think Pochettino made it very clear he wanted 5 or 6 extra players to basically reset the squad, and I think just signing Endo, Melli and Lo Celso and signing them as late as we did as well, I think really has put his nose out of place.
Yeah.
And I think it's very clear for people to see that there's something not right.
So do you think, Ben, do you think, obviously you mentioned them signing Lo Celso late, do you think that with Levy, because obviously that's a clear tactic that he has in terms of bringing signings in, if he had brought Lo Celso and Sessegnon in a lot earlier in the transfer window, that it would have had a bigger impact, and he might have blooded these players possibly a lot earlier because they'd be used to his training methods and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely would have. And obviously, some people will say, now they've signed them late, now they're injured, and you can't presume injuries. Unfortunately, it's just things that happen. But I do believe if they brought him in, because the rumours of Lo Celso were going for like at least a month.
Yeah.
All the way to deadline day. So if we'd have signed him then, or even like 3 weeks before the start of the season, at least would have had time to be prepared for the opening game.
Yeah, what I heard, Ben, was that one of the reasons that it all got delayed was because of the Real Betis deal with PSG, and that's why we ended up going for a loan deal. But apparently it was structured in a way so that there wasn't so much of a buy-on payback to PSG from Real Betis. But I don't know what the truth is on that. Of course, that's possibly why it was delayed. I'm not defending anybody. I know people think I defend Levy. I don't. It's just that.
Yes, you do.
So you're saying it's Levy trying to save money again? That's what you're basically saying.
Well, he was saving money for Betis.
Save money. But yeah, I think it's been evident from first game of the season against Villa that it's just felt that magic has just been missing. Barring in the first half against Arsenal and probably against the Crystal Palace game. Other than that, it's just not been there all season.
I thought we were pretty good against Bayern for about 25 minutes. I thought this looked like Spurs again, didn't it? And then
That sounds like
brilliant.
You're talking about the warm-up, Simon. Just in the warm-up we did it. When the actual game kicked off, I think I'm glad to see.
But I was going to say, in the warm-up, Toby was pinging passes, pinpoint stuff, So,
just mentioning. Sorry, so I'm just mentioning like Toby and that. Ben, when obviously before you joined on, we were talking about the defensive issues, and do you feel that it's now time that we look to drop out players like Alderweireld and Aurier and the players that have been causing issues and start to blood some of these younger players like Sanchez and give them their lead and say, look, go and make these positions their own?
I don't see what harm it can do. I do, and I think there's a few others as well. I think who many people get these words twisted, saying, accuse us of attacking the players for this. It's not. It's simply judging them on how good on the current form. And unfortunately, Toby, Aurier, Danny Rose is another very prime example. They've just not been at it this season.
Yeah, agree.
Obviously, Eriksen hasn't. We all know the story there. But even everyone, even Harry Kane, really, to a certain degree, hasn't. You think back to that pre-season goal against Juventus when he scored from his own half. We thought, whoa, bloody hell. Kane looks off. And then, I don't know, he also just hasn't got going.
It's interesting, isn't it, that we had we were always regarded as this young team that was very promising and going to do things, under Poch, and he was throwing young players in, and we had, we something like an average age of 23 or something. Now we're one of the oldest teams, and I just wonder whether he's, if we love Poch, but has he been, Ben? Do you think he's been too loyal to the guys who have served him well, and beyond the point when they're actually serving him well?
Yeah. You do need to understand when it's time for players to move.
Yeah.
It's the classic point. Look at the time Sir Alex Ferguson has sold players and gone. People went, what? Why is this so? People like Yap Stam, for instance, and David Beckham, and everyone's going, like, why is this selling him? But he knew when they reached the peak. That's it. You need to move them on. You can't.
Best managers do.
You can't have sentimental value, regardless of how much you appreciate a player and what they've done for you. If you know it's time to move them, sorry, but it's got to be done.
Indeed. Well, we will be talking about this interminably until we start winning, I guess, here on the Var Side Spurs podcast. Now, Ben, you've got a fascinating YouTube channel with, hundreds of videos, which mostly focus on Spurs performances of different types. But you also have talked very openly and touchingly, really, about mental health issues. I mean, do you want to, I know it's quite hard for you to sort of sum that up in a few words, but we've been very interested you to tell our listeners, exactly where you're coming from, what's been happening with you.
I'm much in a much happier mode of life than even so much as last year. I was still very, very low. Wouldn't go outside, wouldn't talk to people, wouldn't refuse to do anything really. And over the past year, I've learned, and through some help with counselling and through talking to a lot of Tottenham fans actually, who truly have been some of the greatest help I could have got me back on track, and I feel a lot more confident now to openly speak about it, so that anyone else who may be struggling or don't know where to turn to, instead of me being a statistic of somebody who took their own life, I can be a voice to them and say, go talk to anyone. It doesn't need to be someone you know. Just talk to someone. Speak. That's my speak before it's too late.
Yeah.
Speak before it's too late.
So, I mean, obviously, as Spurs fans, we're obviously aware of your story, and it's touched all of us, and that is part of the reason that we got in contact. And I understand that this is the start of a journey where you want to help other people, if possible, and this is probably the first opportunity. And I understand that you're going to set up your own website to deal with that specifically on that side of things. Is that right?
I'm planning that at the moment, but that is what the goal is. I do want to be able to do that and give anyone out there. It's open for everybody to voice what troubles they're going through and to offer them the opportunity to speak their minds. Because and it's because mental health, it could affect anyone. And I've been under that illusion. I used to assume people who suffer from mental health were crazy people, And through my own experiences, I've learned that it can literally affect any person, and it's scary.
And it can affect people in different ways, of course, can't it? So it's whether it's depression or an anxiety or whatever, there's a broad spectrum, isn't there, that it can affect.
Yes, very much, yeah. And whatever it could be through family troubles, through addiction, through just, I don't know, lack of companionship, whatever it might be.
Life.
Anything, life, it can affect you. So yeah.
And interestingly, Ben, we've seen it with people like Danny Rose, who we've been lambasting for most of the show, but he spoke fairly openly and about mental health issues. And it's interesting that I think it's fair to say that sportsmen are a little bit more likely now to express issues. We've seen, I suppose, Stan Collymore and a lot of cricketers, I think, have been fairly open about it. Do you think that's a good thing? Is that something we ought to all be jumping on and making that much more mainstream?
Yeah, 100%. Yes. I think there's often a conception that sports people can't talk about these kind of things because it perceives them in people's eyes as weak, when actually what they should be being lauded for is strong for being able to speak their minds and talk about these difficult things. And not just people like Danny Rose, but anyone who's any sports athlete or any famous person who suffers should, as I said, speak their mind.
I think, irrespective, I know they don't necessarily like to be seen this way, but they are all role models. And in opening up and being open about any problems and struggles that they have, that leads the way for other people to be as open and to come forward. And as you say, that coming forward and starting to talk is the beginning of a process to get them possibly on a road to recovery, because without that, it only leads probably in one direction, I would have thought.
Yeah. I know from the very first session I had, I literally just sat in the room for the entire hour I was there and literally couldn't think of a word to say, because I just sat around the room looking around thinking, what do I do here? Not if to say what's the point of being here, but like what do I achieve? And luckily through the sessions I finally got to a stage where I could finally speak up. And if it hadn't been for that, I, not gonna lie, probably wouldn't be here talking to you guys right now, but I'm glad that I am.
Well, we are too, and I just wanted to say, before we go on to the depressing subject of predictions for Red Star Belgrade and Liverpool, are there any organisations that you would recommend? If any of our listeners are in any way, having to deal with issues of mental health, would you recommend? Where would they start? Who would they be best served to speak to?
Well, the people I spoke with were at Cruse Bereavement Care. That's Cruse spelled CRUSE, Cruse Bereavement Care, and honestly, they were genuinely the kindest people I could have. They fully understood me. They let me speak. One bit of advice I will give, and I hope anyone listening doesn't take this the wrong way, but I found talking to people who aren't either relatives or people who know you, it's often easier because number one, they don't have an emotional attachment to you, so they find it much easier to pinpoint exactly where you are struggling and what you can do, and they will lay out what the different type of coping mechanisms that you can use. So as I say, anyone out there who's struggling, please just speak before it's too late.
Yeah, well, I think that's great advice, and I have to say from my part, and I think that I speak for the guys here, that there's a really fascinating and insightful discussion there, and we thank you for that. And hopefully, Ben, we'll get you back, and we'll see how you're getting on, and also discuss, perhaps in greater depth, some of the issues that we need to be addressed, because one of the things with mental health is you often can't see it. It's not like you've bashed your knee and there's a bruise on it, and I think that's something that we all have to. Sometimes you've just got to own up to it and try and deal with it, because it can crush you otherwise. Thank you for that, Ben. Now we've got a couple of minutes left. Now, we're recording this show on Monday night. Tomorrow night, Spurs play Red Star Belgrade